Welcome to Glasscast podcast.
I saw statues of black people that were molded right beside the beach there, but I saw firsthand where these people were traded in Liverpool port. My daughter says she cannot take modern studies in her school because of the kind of story that come out of that subject. They treat issues of slavery, racism, and so on. She said it traumatizes her.
I always think that the worst crime against humanity was poverty, hunger, and squalor.
Just like during Babangida time that they encouraged us, IMF encouraged us to sign the structural adjustment program. That basically destroyed Nigeria. But they packaged it in such a manner as if they were helping you out. Yeah. Institutions like the IMF, as far as I'm concerned, even the World Bank and the WTO, they are colonial institutions. Let us look at the US today. They say slave was a... Remember what led to the American Civil War was the issue of slavery. You remember that's exactly what led to it. They said they were fighting the North against the South. They had abolished slavery. That was bullshit. At some point, it was Britain that was supplying slaves to America until America developed what they call a ship that was running faster than the British ship.
You know how many state visits they have in Britain in a year? It's true. Last 2 weeks or so, our president had a state visit here while our Nigeria is burning.
Yes.
But these people are honoring him and giving him a welcome party.
The TV people of Nigeria, when they realized that when you have spots on your body, the slave traders would avoid you, they developed a defensive system. Do you know that piracy was a royal trade, a royal activity?
Where is morality? Where is the love? Welcome to Glasscast podcast. We want to welcome you specially again to this episode of your podcast, our podcast, where we discuss issues based on important facts that drive the framing and the analysis that put into context the subject matter. So from all of us, from Glasscast podcast, we want to welcome you to this special episode. And as you would always expect, we have our very educative and insightful team today in the person of the son of Glasscast, the elder himself, Elder Dr. Liam. What do you have to say to our subscribers and our followers, Elder, on this episode?
I just want to say thank you so much for engaging with us. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for liking. And I promise you, in this episode, continue to share, continue to like, continue to comment. You will learn a lot of things and you continue to learn. And I promise you, we bring to you a very engaging, educative, and exciting episode tonight. Sit back and enjoy yourself.
Sit back and enjoy yourself. And, you know, when you have the maze of Glasscast, you will know that you always have to sit tight, not just sit, but sit tight, because we'll bring you evidence-based analysis. So it's never a dull moment with Mazi Barrister Ikenna Njogu. Mazi, do you want to say hello to our subscribers, our followers, and our listeners?
Hello, everyone. When Elder says it all, there's no need to add anything on top. I think he has covered the ground.
So Elder have covered the ground, and we would always encourage you, as Elder have spoken, to continue to share what we do here. More importantly, your comments, your feedbacks do a lot in improving what we do from this little studio. And that is why we would always say you are part of this project. You are part of Glasscast podcast. Keep those feedbacks coming. Keep those comments coming. We listen, we analyze, we improve by the feedback we receive from you as part of what we do at Glasscast podcast. If you would remember, weeks and months ago, we have done analysis around colonialism post-colonialism, democracy, and systems of government in Africa. It will interest us to know, as always, Africa has always been a product or a true characteristic description of post-colonial society in the modern world. Interestingly, there are activities that predate colonialism, activities that ushered in colonialism in Africa. And that is where we'll be touching on today, based on the feedback we've got. We want to keep analyzing aspects of societal development, especially political, economic, and socio-cultural context that drive such analysis. In the recent past days, precisely on the 26th of March 2026, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution regarding the inhumane treatment of people mostly of African origin who were subjected to issues of slavery. We want to find out today if slavery, as it was before maybe the year 1830s, 1860, talking about over 125 years ago, when it was totally outlawed, does it still persist in our society? As we would analyze today, I remember my basic knowledge of human wants or human needs: food, shelter, and clothing. And based on this analysis, I always think that the worst crime against humanity was poverty, hunger, and squalor. But that resolution last week have brought in a different dimension to this level of analysis by that position of the United Nations saying that slavery was the gravest crime against humanity. And I'm beginning to think that if this is the case, what is the way forward? Should we continue to dwell in the past, or should we learn from the past and move on, or should we find a way to make things better for the world, for all? And that is why we are in the studio today. It will interest you to sit down, sit tight, and listen to this analysis. So if, like I would always say, it's weekend, if you have your water, if you have your popcorn, or anything that will make it very comfortable for you to sit and listen to this analysis today, it will benefit you so much. So with all this long prelude to this discussion, I want to, bring our analyst to this discussion. And I want to start with Elder. So what do you make of this recent resolution by the United Nations General Assembly?
Dr. Thank you so much. I think you've covered a lot of ground, but you said when slavery was outlawed, it may be outlawed on paper, but I think, and I strongly believe, there's still slavery ongoing.
Okay.
By the activities of the former colonial masters in what they are doing in various African countries, including our beloved country, Nigeria. The things that are happening, the kind of leadership that we've got, and the kind of renewal of allegiance our leaders come to do in the West and so on. It tells you that slavery is still ongoing because we are still serving the slave masters. But when we talk about this slavery, people of our age, we don't really understand what that means because we are very young. We didn't experience firsthand what happened. I had a very personal experience, and each time I remember it, I get traumatized. In 2023, we went to Liverpool. I went to Liverpool with my family for just Easter weekend 2023. And we went to Liverpool port. And that was one of the ports that the slaves were transported through. They anchored there. And I saw statues of black people that were molded right beside the beach as a kind of a commemoration of what happened. And when you hear these things, read them on history books, hear stories, you think that this actually happened. How can somebody take somebody, sell the person, and somebody will take the person, force the person to go and do forced labor for me, even to the point of death? But I saw firsthand where these people were traded at Liverpool port. And I was telling my kids this will happen. And up to today, they cannot. Even my daughter says she cannot take modern studies in her school because of the kind of story that come out of that subject. They treat issues of slavery, racism, and so on. She said it traumatizes her that she cannot take that subject, modern studies, in her secondary school. So it's really the fact that United Nations just stamped it on paper is the gravest crime against humanity. We all know that. Which one would have been more grave than slavery? So them saying it is putting pen on paper as to what we already know before. And people who experienced it firsthand will tell you that there is no other crime that could have been committed that is more grave than this. Even the fact that I saw the port where these slaves were bought and sold, I still feel the trauma. And nothing has ever traumatized me to that extent. I have lost people, I have lost my mother, I have lost my mom, but I know death is a natural thing. But that singular experience, I still live with the trauma up to now.
Because when you're talking about living with the trauma, you're talking of a population of over 12, 13 million people. The ones that were accounted for, who were traded, through this means. And millions of them died in the Atlantic Ocean, against their will, against their wishes, against the wishes of their families. So when you are talking about the trauma, I think I don't know how to, it's not quantifiable.
Honestly, it's something I don't want to remember. And if not for this podcast, it's something I don't like discussing because of the feeling it gives to me, because of what I experienced, if you start imagining how were these people feeling, I'm just talking about it because we have to on this podcast, but it's really a very, very grave crime. And whether they say it, whether the United Nations passed it or not, they don't have to pass it, the resolution, for us to know that this is really a grave crime against humanity. So them passing it is confirming what we already know.
Yeah, confirming what we already know. And it took the effort of the current Ghanaian president and the leadership of the Ghanaian government to bring this resolution to the floor of the UN General Assembly. But when we are looking at, because this discussion, we look at it from the legal perspective, from the political perspective, and from the moral perspective. And one would want to ask, why now? Why does the UN have to take this decision in 2026? What is the implication of this? I want to ask Barrister.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I will commend the Ghanaian president. I can't remember his name.
Mahama.
I'll commend him because I think he's quite different from the other colonial stooge that was before him. I honestly, I'm happy I don't even know the name of that one.
Akufo-Addo.
I saw him the other day that he was busy sitting down with then US Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, and urging Anthony Blinken to make sure that they protect Ghana from Burkina Faso, from Mali, from which other was it? Is it Niger Republic? These countries that every African youth know today that they are fighting colonialism. What they are fighting is a war of independence in their countries against colonial influence. Ghana was asking Anthony Blinken, the US, to protect Ghana against the influence of his fellow African neighbors that have been ravaged by, all these colonial people. So I commend him first and foremost. I think that particular issue has always been talked about. The only thing is that those responsible, the West, America, Europe, they've not been interested in addressing that issue. You understand? They've not been interested. If you go to the UN General Assembly, you will see that these countries in the South that have always tried to obey international law. That's exactly what has been happening. So the West, the US, Europe, those who participated in slavery, they know that any condemnation of slavery, the greatest crime against humanity, will mean indictment on their own part. They know that America knows that any condemnation of slavery is towards them, and any compensation that will be paid will be directed from them, as in will be paid by them. They know that very, very well. That's the reason that they have been stamping their feet on acknowledging that as a greatest crime against humanity. And I'm not surprised, actually, that the EU, UK abstained from that vote. And I don't want to say that I'm surprised because I know a lot about the history of America, Israel, and Argentina. So I don't want to say that I am surprised by the fact that they voted against that resolution. There was a comment that you made here about the number of slaves that were transported across the Atlantic. And first, you know that, first and foremost, the Ghanaian resolution, this UN resolution that was spearheaded by Ghana, it pertains exclusively to the transatlantic slave trade, not even to the slave trade that we refer to as the Arab slave trade that went across the Sahara. The Arab slave trade that has been there for 1,000 years, even before the transatlantic slave trade, you see, was even more brutal. I wonder the kind of term that the UN will use whenever they want to address that issue. But on the number, saying it is 12 million is very, very conservative. In fact, I think it's an abuse. It's really annoying to say it's 12 million. It's just like when you ask Turkey, how many Armenians did you kill? Turkey might even tell you 10,000. Whereas millions of Armenians were killed. Or you ask the Nigerian government, how many Biafrans did they kill? You understand? You see how even Nigerian government can even tell you, no Biafran died. We know that millions died. So that is the same attitude they put towards the number of people that they traded across the Atlantic in terms of slave trade. I can tell you now, there are credible writers, credible authors that put the number at over 40 million of Africans. Those who died. There are a lot of them that did not make it, that died in the dungeon. In fact, more people died on the way than those who even arrived. More people died on the way than those who arrived. So, at the end of the day, going back to your question, why now? I think it is, I will say that it is now that the southern sector of the UN General Assembly had taken that courage to decide to harmonize it and rule on it, even though that, as far as I'm concerned, it has no effect, because whatever they rule there is just morally binding. It's not as if it has any, legal binding effect on anybody. That's why, in my opinion, the UN General Assembly should be restructured. Sorry, the United Nations generally should be restructured because it's not effective.
I think if I may contribute to the question you mentioned, why now? We've had leaders in Africa who serve the interests of the slave masters.
Yes.
And you cannot serve the interests of the slave masters and pursue a cause that is against their interests.
Certainly.
You talked about the countries that voted in favor. It's mostly the countries that were affected. Then the perpetrators of this crime Some absented, some voted against it.
Exactly.
Clearly, Britain absented, America
voted against,
Argentina,
all EU countries.
All EU countries. And these were the beneficiaries of this. So you do not expect a leader like we have had in Nigeria who are serving the interests of the slave masters to champion a cause that will be contrary to the interests of their masters.
Exactly.
So you cannot be working against your master. There's a popular saying, he who paves the piper declares the tone. The policy you are implementing in your country, the whatever border economic, political, social or criminal policies you pursue in their country is dictated by those who put you there, those who are serving their interests. So I would take it that probably, why now? Because the man in Ghana now will probably be a kind of independent, has a mind of his
more
own,
independent
minded to pursue agenda that he thinks that morally this is not right. He may not be completely free from the influence of the slave masters, but there are some things you say, you know what? Oh no, this one I'm not going to do it. If they want to sack me, let them sack me.
Exactly.
There are some things your boss will want you to do in the office. You say, you know what? This one I'm not going to do it. So that is what I believe that is the reason why. But otherwise, tell me, why hasn't that been mentioned? If not that the leaders we have had, starting from after our independence, even, let me borrow your word, Nigeria is an artificial entity created by these slave masters. And since it has persisted, we still continue to serve their interests up until now. Last 2 weeks or so, our president had a state visit here while our Nigeria is burning.
Yes.
Immediately he stepped out, multiple killings happening, insecurity, everything. But these people are honoring him, are giving him a welcome party. That's what state visit is.
Yeah, exactly.
A welcome party organized. And you know what? You know how many state visits they have in Britain in a year? It's 2.
So they give Nigeria 1.
They give Nigeria in every year. They only have 2 state visits. They give each, and it's a rigorous process. How many times have you had that there's a state visit? They only give out 2 state visits. And for them to give you the state visit, what it means is that state visit is for their interest.
Yes.
So it's for you to come and whatever you are going to sign, whatever we had the few things the president signed here and in whose interest. So that state visit is, if it's not going to serve their interest, they're not going to give you that state visit. So it tells you my argument that the people we have had do not have the moral courage, because people who put them there are the perpetrators of this crime that we are talking about.
Exactly.
So the issue of why now is we have not had leaders in Nigeria who are independent to champion this cause.
Yeah, so when we look at this from the perspective of the United Nations, the United Nations have always made that statement of slavery being a crime against humanity. And if you look globally, like the Great Britain, like referring to the example you made recently, the Great Britain has, or the UK has been instrumental in legally stopping this idea of slavery, dating back to around 1807 and 1833 and all that. And even recently, UK has law on modern day slavery. I think somebody was sent to prison recently on that law or against modern day slavery. So these countries have, in one way or another, continued to fight against the implications and the effects of that activity called slavery. So does it mean that over the years, the United Nations have always said, oh, this is a crime against humanity? Why using the gravest? Is it because the crime against humanity wasn't listened to by the perpetrators, the supposedly perpetrators? Let us add the word gravest to see if it will have an impact.
Whatever they want to add there, let them add. Whatever they think they're adding. Well, you talked about Britain was in the forefront of abolishing slavery. Is that not correct? If I had you right. Okay. If they're in the forefront of abolishing it, they abolish it because they felt it's wrong, right? Okay. So why did they absent in calling it what it is? Voting why did they absent in the vote of calling what it is? If you think that they abolished it.
Is it a question for me or?
It might be a rhetorical question, but I don't think.
I think I understand what he meant by that. It's a kind of hypocritical for you to claim that we were in the forefront, and then when it was being labeled in the forefront of abolishing that thing that you termed as inhuman, then when it was being labeled by the UN General Assembly as the gravest crime against humanity, you abstined. That's very, very wrong. But there was something that you said that I want to pick on, and that thing is the fact that Britain worked towards the abolition of the slave trade. You know that when you want to sign a trade deal, it's just like what Elder said here, that when they invite you for a state visit to give you tea and to make party for you, you think you are being welcomed, but they are signing an agreement that is against your interest.
Mm-hmm.
But when you are a buffon, you wouldn't know that is what is happening to you. It's just like during Babangida time that they encouraged us, IMF encouraged us to sign the structural adjustment program that basically destroyed Nigeria. But they packaged it in such a manner as if they were helping you out.
Yeah.
But it's clear that some of these institutions, like the IMF, as far as I'm concerned, even the World Bank and the WTO, they are colonial institutions that is established not in the interest of Africa and the South, but in terms of the abolishment of the slave trade. I want to tell you today, categorically clear, that the slave trade was not abolished because the Europeans and Americans saw it as inhuman. That is far from the truth. Anybody that says that has not actually looked very well, read history or looked beyond history. The slave trade was abolished simply because the Europeans saw that it was saturated. And what I mean by something being saturated is everybody who wanted a slave had one. You understand? And there was industrial revolution.
It wasn't profitable anymore.
It wasn't profitable anymore because anyone who wanted it had one. There was industrial revolution. Those who were doing the jobs were no longer needed. Yeah. They were, in essence, number one, there had been a development of technology that was replacing some of those works, most of them that they wanted those slaves to do. At the end of the day, they were not needed. They were no longer needed. So they had to start sending them back. That led to the establishment of Sierra Leone today and Liberia. You understand? Because most of those slaves were shipped back to Africa.
Yeah.
You understand? They were no longer needed. So the brain behind the abolishment of the slave trade was not because the Europeans found it and the Americans found it as inhuman. Let us look at the US today. They say slave was... Remember what led to the American Civil War was the issue of slavery. You remember? That's exactly what led to it. They said they were fighting the North against the South. They had abolished slavery, and the South will still held on to slaves. And you will see the North. Exactly. You will see the North as a virtuous North that didn't want slavery. That was bullshit. That wasn't what happened. First and foremost, the South were not even able to get slaves from Africa. At some point, it was Britain that was supplying slaves to America until America developed what they call a ship that was running faster than the British ships, the Yankee Clipper. So that ship was overtaking British ships to Africa and carrying slaves. You understand? And when they bring those slaves, they were selling it to the South. So the South was more underdeveloped. So at the point where the North has gained some level of development that they were no longer in need of those slaves. That was why they wanted to abolish it. Meanwhile, those slaves were working and needed those that their services were still needed in the South. So it was like the South was saying, how can you sell us slaves? Took our money. And then you are telling us that you have abolished slaves. You understand? So the particular work that was needed for those slave trades, so for those slaves in the North, we are no longer there. And even in the real fact, if you look at the American 13th Amendment, you will see that slavery is not yet abolished. They only abolish slavery outside certain areas. But in the real sense, if you commit a crime, you have automatically become a slave. In America today, if you read their 13th Amendment, outside crime, that's what they wrote there. Once you do, that's why in their prisons, they can render you useless. In American prisons, because of what? The law that abolishes slavery does not pertain to you. You are virtually a slave.
You see,
in American prison.
Another thing I want to contribute is this. We agree that even the American foreign policy, British foreign policy, or whatever policy they have against these former colonies and slave markets is still geared towards the enslavement of the people. Does that mean abolition of slave trade?
None.
For me, is no. Because if you are, whatever you are still doing is to enslave those people. The only difference is that you are not more taking them to your country to enslave them.
Exactly.
Because it's no more profitable.
Exactly.
It's more profitable the way you are doing it now than what you are saying, confirming the point you made.
Yes.
If you pack them now, it was okay because he said when we are ready to go to America, they don't want us to come again. Now we are ready as slaves, come and buy us. They don't need you anymore.
Exactly.
So it's better for them, more profitable for them to enslave you in their country than bringing them over. That's why they abolished. Okay, we are not bringing you over. That's what they said. That's the abolition.
Exactly.
What it means. We are not bringing you over to America to enslave you, but we are still enslaving
you in your own,
your own country.
As slaves.
So that's not, as far as I'm concerned, that's not abolition of slave trade. It's still ongoing.
I want to tell you today. Yes.
In progress.
In progress. I want to tell you today that when you hear people like William Wilberforce, they sing his praises as if he's a saint who came and intervened and led to the abolishment of slavery. Go and look at his records in their own parliament. These people were not acting in your own interest. In fact, it's just like this issue that we call piracy today. Do you know that piracy was a royal trade, a royal activity? If you don't know, you will think that it's only Somalia and Yemenis that do piracy. Piracy was a royal activity. It was the kings and queens that were involved in piracy, going on the high seas, looting people's goods and services. It was only when other people developed the skill to compete with them, and then they themselves entered into certain commercial activities that they needed to be transporting across the seas, that other pirates started attacking. That was when they said, hey, so we cannot freely transport our goods and services across these seas because of these pirates. They then started labeling them as if it wasn't their trade. It originated from kings and queens because they were those who were the principal beneficiaries of the loot from pirates. That's where this slavery is.
Well, like I said when we started, that this is going to be a very insightful and interesting and to an extent enthusiastic conversation. And I believe you may have taken note of some of the facts that we are revealing here. And I know you also have one or two things to contribute to this topic. And because of the elaborate nature of this subject, we are going to do it phase by phase. We are going to have series. I don't know how many series now because it's quite broad. It's based on your contributions and feedbacks on this subject that we would bring in the next series. Remember, I said this conversation started when we talked about colonialism in Africa and in other places. Now we are here and we are moving forward in this series of discussion. Do not hesitate to send us your comments, to send us your feedback, and we would continue to redevelop the analysis as it suits better. Again, because when we talk about Europe abstaining from voting on this resolution, America, Israel, and Argentina voting against it. I think there are some politicians in the West, especially in the UK, the conservative leader who, try to justify the American or Israeli voting against this resolution and saying why did the UK not join forces with those three countries to vote against resolution instead of abstaining like various European countries. Is it an indictment factor to the UK politicians or UK capitalists and otherwise? Mazi, I want to.
I think I will allow us.
Okay, let's give us an.
I've said it repeatedly. Every politician doesn't have anybody's interest at heart. And every politician will do or say anything that he or she thinks that will keep him or her popular or will give her power. That is what has happened. Our sister, Kemi Badenoch, who is saying that they should have voted not abstaining, is serving the interest of the slave masters.
Finish.
Whether we like it or not, we are immigrants in this country. And the real we probably may be British, but we only have British passports. We are not British. Truth be told. And they are still in the majority. She wants to be the prime minister. What do you expect her to stay? She wants to do things, say things that will make her get the votes that she needs to be the prime minister. She's a politician. She's not thinking about Nigeria. She's not thinking about even
Ghana,
anybody. What she wants to do or say is something that is popular among the people who will give her the vote to be the prime minister. Even the current prime minister, what he has done is to please everybody. He doesn't want to offend the former slave descendants. And he doesn't also want to offend the white people by absenting. So that's a strategic position for him to get support from both sides. Oh, this man did not vote against it, or he did not vote for it. He abstained. So they're all doing things that would make them popular, keep them in power, and make them win election.
Exactly.
And now, when we are, because you said this, I try to reflect on the reason for the, absenting from voting on this particular resolution. Is it because the United Nations, based on the request of Ghana, placed what is called reparatory justice on this subject matter?
It has nothing to do. There's no amount they pay that would solve that problem. In criminal law, they said there's something they call I don't know the term now, to compensate a victim of crime. And no amount of money you pay to a victim, probably somebody that's suffered rape, let me use that word. There's no amount of monetary payment that you cure the emotional trauma, the damage that has been done. So whether they pay all the whole thing, what of the people who died? How are you going to compensate for the death of somebody? What of the lost property, lost generation? The trauma that our children, descendants are still facing up to now, including myself, who wasn't around when this slavery happened, and I'm still talking about it. How much can you pay for us to recover our descendants? Very intelligent people, very smart, very hardworking. How do you compensate for that? So no amount of money, even if they turn over the whole of Britain to Africa, it's not going to compensate for that. So whatever amount they are talking about is infinitesimal compared to what has happened
exactly
to the Africa. It's a decimation of Africa, a generation wiped out. And we're talking about monetary compensation. Why? Because it's money. What is money?
And remember, he just said the failing of the daughter in terms of taking modern studies, emotional impact. You understand? And these people took the best of Africa out of Africa. If you were sick, they wouldn't take you. If you had a spots on your body, they wouldn't take you. In fact, I remember the TV people of Nigeria, when they realized that when you have spots on your body, the slave traders would avoid you. They developed a defensive system where they will be putting spots on their people. So that the slave traders, when they catch their people, they will look at them and say, oh, this person must have developed smallpox. So we are not going to take the person because the person might spread the disease inside the same ship where we are taking them. So that was a kind of defensive mechanism that they used to safeguard their own people from that thing.
And in doing that, because if you wake up every morning or if you see Kemi Badenoch, I think what in a very jovial and very, what is the right word for it? On a very lighter note, when Kemi Badenoch wakes up in the morning or before she goes to bed at night, everything that Kemi Badenoch says about Keir Starmer is U-turn, 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 U-turn. I can't remember how many U-turns that Kemi Badenoch have used on Keir Starmer. But in this case, it's so instead of Kemi Badenoch now doing U-turn, Kemi Badenoch has done somersault. So I think it is something Keir Starmer have to take note of. So anytime she sits on that dispatch box and say Keir Starmer has done how many U-turns? 15 U-turns, and Keir Starmer can now look at Kemi Badenoch and say, you have done somersault.
Obviously, Keir Starmer should come and borrow this clip from Glasscast and play it to Kemi Badenoch.
That Kemi Badenoch has done somersault, and we take it on a very lighter note, but here the subject is on man's inhumanity to man. We are talking about psychological, emotional, economic, social, cultural, because when we are talking about slavery here, it's not only about taking the individuals as slave, but there were lootings also happening within this environment. Properties were looted, artifacts were looted, and those artifacts are still sitting there in London, they are still sitting there in Rome, they are still sitting there in many places of the world, stolen from this
including Scotland,
all over the place. And it's a very, very broad area to look at. And if you look at all that have been done, there's nothing much you could do than to become emotional to the treatment, especially looking at we are not there, but thinking of somebody who is chained in a specific position, thrown under a dark area of the ship, thrown into the Atlantic Ocean, and left there to in a very despicable manner, and left to die in Atlantic Ocean. Their remains were not recovered. Their families have no closure for their demise, and all that. It brings to question, where is morality? Where is the love? Where is humanity? And these are questions we would continue to answer as we address this series of episodes on slavery. We'll come back again to talk about the levels of reparations that has been put on the table, and we'll dissect these reparations. Remember, even when, in my place, they said when one finger is pointing towards somewhere, there are fingers also pointing towards you. We would also look at the roles of Africans, African leadership, African institutions in this practice, because there is a saying that okeno n'ụlọ gwara okeno n'ọhịa n'azụ na ngịga. That is an Igbo adage. So we will do further analysis of this. And when we are talking about reparations, we would also look at, where is the reparation going to? Is it going to current artificial territories in Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, all of them? Or is it going to the countries in the Caribbean? Where is it going to? Or is it going to the children and great-great-great-grandchildren of enslaved individuals that live in the West? So where is the compensation going to? We'll come to that analysis, and we would encourage you to follow this thread, and you will learn a lot on this subject. On this note, we want to say thank you for being with us. I don't know if Elder wants to say a concluding remark before we close this part of this series, and we'll come back again.
Just to say thank you so much, and watch out for the next series of this episode, because this is just the beginning.
This is just the beginning, and I believe Mazi would have something to add to that.
Yes, I think I will end by saying my mom used to tell me that you have to count one before you count two. So in relation to this compensation stuff that you said, I think first and foremost, let's agree that there should be compensation before talking on the modalities to which that compensation will be disbursed, distributed, or, applied. The Japanese that America dealt with during the Second World War, or was it even First World War, they were paid compensation. The Jews that Germany dealt with, killed 6 million Jews, they were paid compensation. But African country, the slave trade, the gravest crime against humanity, and the issue of compensation is not even being agreed by the perpetrators of this heinous crime. That's unfathomable. So that should be paid.
So we'll come to that. We would dedicate an episode on what we think, based on emerging evidence, how these compensations could be addressed. But at this point, we want to say we are very glad to have you sat here and listen to this analysis, and we'll be more glad if you give us back your comment, give us feedback, and let us know what you think, because we are going into the next stage of this series, and we want to build on evidence that we get from our followers, from our listeners, and from our subscribers, and from us here and the entire crew of Glasscast Podcast. Till we meet again, have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.